Buried beneath brine, one clue cracked the whole case. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Drop a comment and share where you're tuning in from. I always want to know. Your thoughts make this space something special. Here we go. There are 3 things you don't mess with if you value your life: a venomous snake, a New York traffic cop's lunch break, and Nero Wolfe's kitchen schedule. I've seen grown men reduced to whispering just to avoid offending Fritz while he's garnishing an aspic. So when the doorbell rang at 11:13 a.m. on a Thursday, I was already halfway to the front hall with the kind of look I reserve for uninvited evangelists and mailmen with opinions. The guy on the stoop didn't wait for me to invite him in. He was past the threshold the second I turned the knob, practically brushing me aside like I was a houseplant in his way. 40-ish, trim, in one of those suits that says, "I own a company," but not, "I run it well." He had the jaw of a prize fighter, and the eyes of someone who thought he was smarter than the room, which in this house was a dangerous affliction. "Archie Goodwin?" he asked, with the kind of confidence that said he didn't actually care if I was or not. "Congratulations," I said. "You win the privilege of waiting while I check if Mr. Wolfe is taking walk-ins. You've got a name." He pulled off leather gloves like a man performing for an invisible audience. "Miles Faber. I'm here on behalf of, well, let's just say it's not a social call." I left him in the front room and did the long march to the office. Wolfe was seated naturally in the big chair that looked like it came with the house. His eyes were closed, lips moving silently, which either meant he was counting to 10 or composing a letter to the editor in his head. "A Mr. Miles Faber, sir," I said. "Well-dressed, well-fed, and walking like he owns the block. Says it's not a social call. Would you like me to eject him manually or by implication?" Wolfe didn't open his eyes. "No." A pause. "Bring him." I ushered Faber in. Wolfe's eyelids lifted a 1/4 inch. That was the full fanfare. "Mr. Wolfe," Faber began, taking a seat without invitation. "Brave. I represent the Valley Crest Gourmet Council." Wolfe gave the barest nod, a kind of moral courtesy for the name of a thing he'd never heard of and hoped never to again. "We're a cooperative of artisanal food producers," Faber continued. "Small batch sauces, hand-packed pickles, ethically sourced caviar." Wolfe lifted a finger. "Spare me the catechism. You sell food to people with money and affectations." "What do you want?" Faber blinked, regrouped. "One of our members, Agatha Solwick, has gone missing 2 days ago. No note, no clue, nothing disturbed in her home except for a single item." I leaned against the doorframe. "Let me guess. The cookie jar." Faber looked at me like I'd insulted his mother. "The pickle jar." Wolfe shifted. That counts as movement in his world. "A jar of pickles?" "She made them herself," Faber said. "Horseradish garlic spears. Very popular at trade events. But this jar was different. It wasn't for sale. It sat in her test kitchen, always sealed, always in the same place. It's missing. That and Agatha." Wolfe's fingers began drumming faintly on the chair arm. "Not interest, rhythmic annoyance. I'm not a policeman," he said. "We know that's why I'm here. We've been warned not to involve the police." Wolfe opened his eyes fully. "Warned? By whom?" Faber smiled without warmth. "That's part of what you'll discover, along with why someone would want Agatha out of the picture and why they'd take an old jar of pickles to do it." "I don't leave this house," Wolfe said. "Good," Faber said. "The answers are already coming to you." He dropped a slim envelope onto Wolfe's desk. "There's a check and a list of the other council members. You'll want to start there. You'll find we all have seasoned opinions." He stood, nodded, and left. No goodbyes, no backward glance. Just the faint echo of expensive souls down the steps. I gave Wolfe a look. "You're taking this one?" He closed his eyes again. "Yes." "Why?" Wolfe's lips curled slightly. because I detest horseradish. And yet I find myself curious. That was wolf speak for someone just lied to me, and I want to know why. Case open, Wolfe didn't say another word for a full 3 minutes after Faber left, which in his dialect meant his brain was warming to the job. I let him marinate while I scanned the contents of the envelope. Typed list, no letterhead, 10 names, all paired with quirky little titles like Infusion Director and Pickle Advocate. People who spent their days arguing about brine ratios and whether turmeric counted as cheating. Wolfe opened one eye. "Take the sedan," he said. "Begin with Mrs. Doris Brown, 3rd on the list. She's titled as Fermentation Steward. Sounds delightful. She's the only one with a Brooklyn address. Subtract the ostentation." "Subtracting ostentation would leave me unemployed, sir." He closed the eye again. I took the hint, grabbed my coat, and was out the door by noon. The drive to Brooklyn was made tolerable by the fact that Mrs. Brown's building was only mildly depressing and didn't smell like boiled cabbage. I was buzzed in by a voice that sounded like it could curdle cream. She opened the door wearing a pink kimono and a scowl that said she had no time for casual nonsense. "You're not from Bon Appetit, are you?" she said. "No, ma'am. Name's Goodwin. I'm with Nero Wolfe, the fat man." "About time. Come in. Keep your shoes on." Her place was a shrine to mold. Every surface had a jar, jug, or crock bubbling with something inedible looking. I dodged a swinging rack of kombucha bottles and perched myself on a stool. "Agatha's missing," I said. "You were close?" "Close? Agatha wouldn't share a bus seat if the Pope sat next to her. But yes, we respected each other, in our own way." "And you're all part of this gourmet council?" she snorted. "Gourmet, please. Half of them wouldn't know a lactobacillus if it pickled their teeth." But Agatha knew things. She had a gift. The kind of palate you can't teach. She could smell deceit in a dill sprig. Did she have enemies on the council? "They're food people." "Of course she did." I pulled out the list. "Give me impressions, one-liners." She took the list, squinted at it. "Clive Donnery, envies everyone, hides it poorly. Hester Falk, never met a lie she didn't ferment. Franco Willis, harmless unless someone else is winning. Deidre Yates, cunning. Dresses like a monk, sells like a fox." I let her go on. She had sharp words for all of them, but nothing useful on Agatha's disappearance. Until she reached the bottom. "Miles Faber," she said slowly. "Now there's a jar that needs sealing." "You don't like your chairman?" "He's not our chairman. He's our handler. He's the one who made us sign that blasted confidentiality charter. He said it was to protect our intellectual ingredients. I think it was to keep us from comparing notes. What would Agatha think of that? Agatha hated secrecy. She said recipes should be shared. But she didn't oppose Faber, not openly. Maybe she thought she was playing a longer game. I nodded, stood. "Thank you, Mrs. Brown." "One more thing. Do you know anything about a special jar Agatha kept? Something not for sale?" Her face shifted just slightly. "I saw the flicker. The horseradish garlic spears," she said. "Right. It's missing. She never let anyone near that jar. Said it wasn't ready, that it had to age." "For what?" She never said. But I think it was part of something else. A bigger recipe. She was working on something experimental. That's all I know. She ushered me out without a handshake. I took the elevator down and called the brownstone as soon as I hit the sidewalk. "She's a gold mine of insults and half-truths," I told Wolfe. "But she gave us something. Faber's no neutral party, and Agatha had a jar no one was supposed to touch." "Did Mrs. Brown react when you mentioned it?" She blinked. "A singularly expressive movement," Wolfe said. "Return, we'll bait the next hook." When I got back, Fritz was slicing fennel, and the kitchen smelled like ambition. Wolfe was in his chair, surrounded by silence and orchid humidity. I filled him in. He tapped a finger on the list. "Deidre Yates," he said. "She's local. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. "You're expecting her here?" "No," Wolfe said. "I'm expecting someone else first." He didn't elaborate, so I didn't ask. The doorbell rang at that moment. Wolfe allowed himself a half-smile. He was never wrong about timing. I opened the door to a woman in a trench coat with a violet brooch, and the kind of posture you see in ballet instructors and Supreme Court justices. She didn't introduce herself. She just said, "I believe Mr. Wolfe will want to see this." She held up a clear plastic bag. Inside it, floating like a message in a bottle, was a broken pickle spear. Pale green, sharp-edged and smeared with something dark. Wolfe's voice floated from the office. "Archie, bring it in." The game had changed. I took the bag from her hand like it was the Holy Grail dipped in vinaigrette. Up close, the spear looked innocent enough, except for the jagged edge at the base where it had broken off, and the faint brown smear clinging to one side. Blood, mud, barbecue sauce? I couldn't tell, and didn't try sniffing it. Wolfe would have skinned me. "With a butter knife if I'd tainted the evidence. This way," I said, stepping aside. She entered the brownstone like she'd done it before. Not with comfort, exactly, but with the air of someone who knew she belonged in any room she chose to stand in. She was maybe late 30s, with hair the color of dark roast coffee and the kind of features you'd call handsome because beautiful sounded too decorative. I ushered her into the office. Wolfe's head tilted barely an inch to acknowledge her entrance. I placed the bag on his desk, careful not to let it touch the blotter. "Explain," he said. She looked at me, then at Wolfe. "I'm Deidre Yates. I wasn't sure I'd come until this morning. Then I saw something that made me change my mind. You were expected," Wolfe said. "You're on the list." "I know. I wrote it." She sat down, straight-backed. "Faber asked me to draft it. I had final say on order and description. Yet your own title is least revealing." "I prefer that," she said simply. "Let the others flatter themselves." Wolfe lifted the bag by a corner, examining the spear like it might speak. "Where did you find this?" "I didn't find it. It was sent to me. In a plain envelope. No return address. Just the bag inside, and a note." She reached into her purse and produced a folded slip of paper. I took it and opened it, typed. No signature. "Tell Wolfe. She's not the only thing that's been preserved. Cute, cryptic, and not entirely meaningless." Wolfe handed the bag back to me. "Refrigerate it in a sealed container, then rejoin us." I obeyed, placing it in one of Fritz's labeled specimen jars in the fridge, somewhere between pickled red onions and marinated anchovies. When I returned, Deidre was mid-monologue. She had secrets. That jar was one of them. I never saw inside it, but I know she kept it in a temperature-controlled cabinet. She told me once that it wasn't food, not in the traditional sense. "What then?" Wolfe asked. "A message." That's what she called it. She said it would outlast her. That silenced even Wolfe for a beat. Then he said, "You presume she's dead?" "I presume she expected to disappear." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "You're careful with language, Miss Yates. I approve. But I don't believe you came here to guess. You received this message, the spear and the note, less than 12 hours after I became involved. That suggests the sender wants me to accelerate my efforts. Why? I can't say. But I can tell you this. Agatha knew something about Faber. Something that made her very, very careful. She confided in you?" "No, but I noticed patterns. When she saw him, she recorded their meetings. Always kept the recorder hidden, sometimes in plain sight, under a napkin in a tote bag. I once saw her switch out a memory card right after he left." "Do you have any of those recordings?" I asked. "No." but I know where she kept them. Or rather, where she said she did. There's a cabinet in her kitchen behind the spice rack. She installed a false back. I looked at Wolfe. He gave the faintest nod. "You'll go," he said. "Confirm the cabinet. Do not touch it. If there's anything inside, leave it be. I will send Mr. Panzer to collect it properly." "Yes, sir." Deidre stood. "There's one more thing. If she's dead, it wasn't random. Someone needed her silenced. And if that spear means what I think it does, then that someone is losing control." Wolfe inclined his head. "Miss Yates, you've been helpful. I expect you to remain available." "I have no intention of vanishing," she said, and walked out with the same calm certainty she arrived with. The door clicked, shut behind her. Wolfe spoke without opening his eyes. "She's frightened. Sure didn't show it. That's the point, Archie. Terror often dresses itself in poise. If she came here, she believes something is closing in." I looked down at the note again. "She's not the only thing that's been preserved." "Could be a threat," I said. "Could be a boast," Wolfe replied. "Preservation implies intention. Someone wants this to unfold, like a game." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Yes, and the board has already been arranged. By the time I reached Agatha Solwick's townhouse in Gramercy Park, the light had gone soft and syrupy, with the kind of orange haze that makes even New York look sentimental. I used the key provided by the doorman, standard issue for single women of means who traveled a lot and liked their neighbors not to call the cops over a missed dinner party. Inside, it smelled faintly of cinnamon and vinegar. The spice rack was where Deidre said it would be, tucked beside a built-in wine shelf. I slid it gently to the side. The false back wasn't subtle. It was a lacquered panel with no screws and a slight notch at the bottom. I didn't open it, but I confirmed what I needed to. It was there, it was real, and if Agatha hid something, this was her vault. I called Wolfe from the stoop. "It's legit," I said. "False back behind the coriander and fennel. Undisturbed. Panzer is already en route. Return." I started walking back toward the car when I spotted him. Tall, trim, expensive shoes. Miles Faber. He wasn't watching me. He was across the street pretending to examine a sidewalk planter. But the angle of his head, the turn of his body, I'd tailed enough men to know when one was pretending not to watch. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I climbed into the car, let the engine idle, and watched my rear view until he turned the corner. At the brownstone, Wolfe listened without comment as I laid it all out. The cabinet, the sighting, the angle of Faber's chin. He nodded. "We will not confront him, not yet." "Why not?" "Because if he is the spider, he believes himself unobserved. And if he is not, confronting him too soon will drive the real spider deeper into the web." He reached for the pickle spear jar, now sealed and labeled. "This," he said, "is bait. We will let it rest. Tomorrow you will call the rest of the council. One by one. You will be friendly, curious, disarmingly ignorant. Any questions you want me to ask?" "No. Just listen. Let them fill the air." I poured myself a drink. "You think Agatha knew she'd be taken?" "I think." Wolfe said, "She knew exactly when it would happen. The preservation was not only of the spear, it was of her plan." The doorbell rang again. I checked the clock. 9:46 p.m. I opened the door. It was Saul Panzer. He held up a small black bag. "Got it," he said. "Memory cards. 4 of them. Labeled by date. One's marked with a red sticker. That's the one she hid behind the jar." Wolfe took the bag like it contained a saint's bones. His fingers brushed the red stickered card. "This," he said, "is her voice." And somewhere in a room filled with food and lies, Agatha Solwick was speaking to us from a jar. Saul left the card on Wolfe's desk like it was too hot to hold. He gave me a quick nod and disappeared back into the night, as efficient and noiseless as a well-oiled drawer. Wolfe stared at the card without touching it. He didn't like electronics, not because he didn't understand them, but because they required movement. For him, anything that couldn't be solved from a seated position was an evolutionary step backward. "Archie," he said, "use your laptop." "Sir, this isn't how I imagined our first movie night together." "Spare me." I booted it up and slotted the card. The folder names were clean. Rec 1, Rec 2, Rec 3, and Rec 4 red. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly at the lack of imagination. I clicked on the fourth. The file was audio only. No timestamp, no metadata, just a hiss of ambient room tone. Then, a voice, Agatha's, smooth and clipped, with the practiced cadence of someone used to giving instructions and not repeating herself. "If this is being played, I'm gone, or I'm close to it. Either way, I've failed at containment." Wolfe's eyes opened slowly. I've always known that Faber had leverage over someone or something. I couldn't prove it, but I knew it was about more than food. The council was just a front. The product lines were real, but they were a delivery system. I looked at Wolfe, but he didn't return it. He was stock still. "There's a formula. I discovered it 6 months ago, hidden in the metadata of a shared spreadsheet Faber sent out, disguised in shelf-life data. I only noticed because I caught a decimal point that didn't make sense." The audio crackled. A chair moved. Paper rustled. "I reverse-engineered it. It's not about pickles, it's about biochemistry. This compound, delivered in food form, can create subtle dependency, harmless in one dose. But over time, it modifies dopamine response, creates cravings." Wolfe's fingers twitched once. That, in his language, was a scream. I tested it once on myself and then I stopped, because it worked. The voice paused. When it resumed, it was quieter. "I didn't go to the police because I needed evidence, not just formula, motive, method, connection, and I needed to find out who else was involved." Then, a louder sound, like a drawer being opened. "The jar, the one I always kept in the cabinet? It has the original test batch, sealed, untouched, untampered. If it's missing, someone knew, and if someone knew, I may already be gone." Click. The file ended. Wolfe didn't speak. He looked at the screen for another full minute before saying, "Play it again." I did. All of it. No change in his posture. Just those grey eyes narrowing fractionally every time she spoke a word like formula or dependency. When it ended a second time, he nodded once. "She was precise," he murmured. "No hysteria, no speculation. Just facts carefully wrapped in conditionals, the mark of someone who expected her voice to do the work." I sat back. If she's right, if this thing is addictive, we're not dealing with missing persons. We're dealing with criminal manipulation, on a pretty wide scale. "Wider," Wolfe said. "You heard her. The council is a delivery system, disguised as a boutique collective. You think the others know. Not all, but one or two certainly. Faber is at the center, but he is not alone." I drummed my fingers on the desk. "So, what now?" "Now," Wolfe said, "we listen." And that's what we did. Over the next hour, we went through the first 3 recordings. They were less dramatic, snippets of conversation between Agatha and various council members, Deidre discussing brine ratios, Franco Willis rambling about a failed sauerkraut expansion. Then Faber, twice. Both times his tone was pleasant but tight. He never let her steer the conversation, always brought it back to production schedules, taste tests, liability clauses. He was careful. But in the second recording, near the end, he slipped. "Agatha, you're making decisions that impact all of us, Miles, without transparency." Faber, "Transparency is a recipe for lawsuits, Agatha. Trust the system we've built." Agatha, "I'd rather trust the ingredients." Faber, "You've already eaten them. That line hung in the room like a bad smell. He knows, I said. He knew she figured it out. Wolfe's eyes didn't move. And he taunted her quietly, intellectually, the cruelty of the clever. I closed the laptop. You want me to keep playing dumb and friendly with the others? Yes. Until one of them cracks. Tomorrow you will call Franco Willis and Hester Falk. One of them may already suspect they're under suspicion. And what about Faber? He will come to us, Wolfe said. Soon. He was right. Again. It was just past 11 when the intercom buzzed. I answered. Faber's voice, filtered through static, sounded like someone trying to keep cool in. A burning room. I need to speak to Wolfe now. I glanced at the office. Wolfe didn't blink. Send him in, he said. Faber walked in looking less like a CEO and more like a man who'd been yelled at in 4 time zones. His tie was askew, his collar unbuttoned. Still trying to project confidence, but the cracks were there. You've been busy, he said to Wolfe. I'm rarely idle, Mr. Faber. Sit. Faber didn't. He planted his hands on the back of the guest chair and leaned forward. I know Deidre was here. I know you've spoken to Doris Brown. And I know you've been in Agatha's townhouse. Wolfe didn't move. You're well informed. I want to be clear, Faber said. Whatever she told you, whatever theory she was spinning, it's not based in fact. She had health issues, paranoia, obsession. Wolfe gestured lightly. You're here because you're afraid, not of Agatha's voice, but of what it confirms. Faber's jaw tightened. If you accuse me of something, you'd better have proof. I have something better, Wolfe said. I have your words, and hers. Faber stared at him for 3 full seconds. Then he sat. I want to resolve this quietly, he said, before lawyers get involved, before reputations are damaged. Indeed, Wolfe said, so do I, but I cannot help you. Why not? Wolfe leaned back, eyes half-lidded. Because you are not my client. Agatha Solwick is. She's missing. Yes, Wolfe said, and I am preserving her intent. Faber stood. This is bigger than you know. You're playing with things you don't understand. No, Wolfe said. I understand them. I simply refuse to taste them. Faber hesitated, on the verge of saying something, then thought better of it. He left without another word. I waited until the front door clicked shut. He's desperate, I said. He's cornered, Wolfe corrected. And a cornered man reveals his alliances. Watch who moves next. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Wolfe lifted his glass of beer and murmured almost to himself, they put it in the food. The oldest trick in the world. And still the most effective. I didn't argue. I just poured myself a drink and joined him in silence. Outside, the city churned. Inside the brownstone, war was coming, and the front line was a pickle jar. Morning came with the kind of cloud cover that made the city look like it hadn't slept well. I'd had just enough coffee to make a snide remark, and not enough to care if anyone laughed. Wolfe was all ready. In the office, his lips moving through a Latin passage I didn't recognize, probably Seneca, possibly a soup recipe. The air felt different, not heavy, but tense. The kind of stillness you get just before someone decides to bluff on a bad hand. I placed the list of council members on Wolfe's desk. Franco Willis and Hester Falk are up next, I said. You want cheerful, clueless Archie or subtle insinuations? B? Hugh, Wolfe replied. But if Hester offers tea, decline. Sound advice, considering the kind of company she kept. I started with Franco Willis. He answered after the 4th ring, and sounded like a man whose biggest crisis in life had been a mislabeled spice jar. Cheerful, breezy, slightly out of breath, as though he'd been pacing and trying not to sweat. Mr. Goodwin, I've heard of you. Nero Wolfe's right hand, or is it left? Ambidextrous when needed, I said. Got a moment to chat? Of course, of course. Is this about Agatha? Dreadful business, just awful. Not like her to disappear without a dramatic announcement. You knew her well? Not especially. We shared a booth at a food expo last year. She brought those garlic spears everyone hated publicly, and stole privately. Brilliant woman. Cold as a frozen trout, but brilliant. And Faber. His tone flattened slightly. Hard to say. Visionary but tight-lipped. Likes control. Doesn't like feedback. I made a few more passes. Asked about the council, the secrecy, the formulas. He dodged like a pro, never once saying anything that could come back to haunt him. When I hung up, I had a pretty clear picture. Franco was either innocent or terrified. Enough to fake it convincingly. Then came Hester Falk. She answered with a voice like dry paper rubbed between fingers. Controlled, formal, Mr. Goodwin. Miss Falk, I'm following up on Agatha Sulwick's disappearance. I understand you were close. I was never close to anyone, she said. Not professionally, but Agatha and I shared an understanding. About? Boundaries. Intellectual ones. Recipes, flavor structures, proprietary balances. You don't steal what you can't replicate. I liked her already. Not in the way you like a person, but in the way you like knowing exactly where the weapons are in a room. And yet she was stolen, I said. Vanished. Hester paused. I warned her, she said. Faber doesn't tolerate unpredictability. Interesting, because he came by last night to do just that. Of course he did, she said flatly. Damage. Control. You sound like someone who's not surprised. I'm not. Agatha knew things, too many things, and she didn't hide them well. There was a pause, a click, maybe a cigarette. She sent me a message 2 days before she vanished, Hester said quietly. I deleted it. Regret is a terrible motivator, Mr. Goodwin, but it keeps me honest. What kind of message? She said, if I go, the council doesn't end, it implodes, that's all. Wolfe would like that. Implosion was a particularly clean kind of catastrophe. She also told me to stay out of her kitchen, Hester added. I didn't listen. That's how I know she was building something, not just pickles, a structure, a pattern. You think she intended to reveal Faber? I think she intended to force him to reveal himself. I ended the call and sat back in the office chair. She's honest, but bitter, I told Wolfe. Says she regrets ignoring a warning. She won't be alone in that, Wolfe said. He gestured to the pickle jar again, sealed, untouched in the kitchen refrigerator, now labeled P1, evidence. Fritz had even made a little tag for it, as if it were a rare cheese. There's a phrase Agatha used, Wolfe said. A message. That outlasts me. That's not merely poetic, it's operational. You think she built a trap? No, she built a broadcast, one that wouldn't function until she was removed. And we've tripped the signal? No. Faber has. That made me sit up. She disappears, the jar vanishes, then reappears in fragments delivered anonymously to the one man most likely to decipher it. It's a transmission. Then who sent it? Someone who wanted her voice heard, Wolfe said. Someone who doubted she'd be found alive. The doorbell rang again. 3rd time in 2 days. If this kept up, I was going to demand hazard pay for shoe leather. I opened the door. It was Clive Donnery. He looked wrecked. Pale, collar, open tie dangling like a forgotten leash. His hair was damp and not from rain. The man had sweated through something, and now he stood in my hall like he wasn't sure whether he was confessing or collapsing. I need to talk to Wolfe, he said. I don't know who else. I cut him off. You picked the right panic. Room, come in. Wolfe watched him enter like a botanist watches a rare mushroom rot. Clive sat, elbows on knees. No preamble. I think they're watching me. Wolfe didn't blink. Who? The council. Or whoever's behind it now. Since Agatha, since she went missing, things have been wrong. Define wrong, Mr. Donnery. Emails disappearing. My product testing lab was broken into, but nothing was stolen, just sampled. Sampled, I asked. Someone opened sealed product, examined it, then resealed it. They wanted me to know they could. Wolfe spoke softly. And what did you do? I panicked. Then I called my supplier. He said the chemical specs had been altered, without my authorization. He said there were anomalies, dopaminergic markers. Wolfe. And I exchanged a glance. Why didn't you report it? Because I signed Faber's charter. Non-disclosure, binding arbitration, all of it. If I go to the police, I lose everything. Which is why you're here, Wolfe said. Clive nodded, eyes red. I think Agatha found the same trail, only she followed it further, and now she's gone. Do you know where she kept records, notes, anything physical? Clive hesitated. No, but Deidre might. They had a system, a way of tagging batches. Colored seals, I never understood it, but Deidre said it was Agatha's backup key. That was enough. I could already see Wolfe's mental ledger scribbling. Clive stood uncertain. Do you think she's dead? Wolfe didn't answer, which was an answer. I walked Clive out and returned to the office. He's scared enough. To tell the truth, I said. Then he will be useful, Wolfe replied. He turned toward the sealed jar on the tray beside him. Have it tested, he said. Quietly, discreetly. I want confirmation. Of what? That we are dealing not just with manipulation, but with biochemical design. I want to know if what she said is true, if that spear is addiction in a brine bottle. I nodded. And if it is? I asked. Wolfe exhaled through his nose, a long, patient sound like wind through drapes. Then we are not investigating a disappearance, he said. We are dismantling a system. And with that he turned his chair away from me and toward the orchids, because of course he did. The war hadn't started. It had been running all along. We were just now hearing the music. The jar left the brownstone, in a discreet courier's padded case labeled glassware sample, fragile. I hand-delivered it to an off-the-books chemist Wolfe trusted more than most doctors, and almost as much as Fritz. The man's real name was buried in a pile of dead tax forms, but he went by Becker and never asked questions that couldn't be answered by silence. Wolfe had once used him to verify the presence of arsenic in a rhubarb tart. This time I said one word: dopamine. Becker's eyebrow went up, and the test was on. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was deep in an orchid transfer. It wasn't a ritual, it was a shield. He didn't pace or fidget, he replanted. When the world outside grew volatile, Wolfe responded by controlling roots. I gave him the update and waited. He didn't speak for 10 seconds. Then, you will call Deidre. Ask her what she meant by backup key. She won't be surprised. I'm asking. She'll be flattered. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring, already expecting me. I was wondering when you'd reach out again, she said. Has the jar spoken? It's whispering, I said. I need clarification. Agatha's color-coded seals, Clive mentioned them. Ah. Deidre's voice dropped half a tone. She never explained it directly, but I watched her. She used 4 colors, blue, green, yellow, and red. Blue meant normal distribution, nothing unusual. Green meant altered formula, yellow meant trial, red was the control, I said. The original batch. Yes, as pure as it gets. She said if anything ever happened to her, the red seals would explain everything. Do you know how many jars had red seals? I only saw 2. She never sold them. Kept them apart. One in her kitchen, the other... She paused. She said it was somewhere safe, but not in her home. Could be anywhere. Not quite, Deidre said. She told me once that safety was not just about place. It was about people. She said if she couldn't trust a location, she'd trust a pattern. I hung up, thinking hard. When I relayed the conversation, Wolfe tilted his head. She is hinting, he said, at behavioral encryption. She hid the jar not by securing it, but by making it seem like something ordinary. Precisely. A location no one would question because it fits a routine. I sat down. We need to think like Agatha. Where did she go regularly? Wolfe didn't answer. Instead, he rang for Fritz. When the man entered, towel over one arm like he'd just dismissed a roast, Wolfe said, "List the delivery addresses for the past month of our gourmet orders, specifically items from Valleycrest." "Affiliates." Fritz didn't blink. "I'll retrieve the log." He returned 10 minutes later with a neat binder. Wolfe flipped pages with a fingertip, not reading so much as scanning. Then he stopped. "There," he said, 2 weeks before she disappeared. A delivery from Sulwick Preserves to the small batch cheese shop on 10th. "Madison and Peel," I said. "I've been in there, little storefront, smells like ambition and Gruyere." "She didn't deliver directly," Wolfe said. "But the timing is conspicuous. 3 days after she visited, the store received a shipment labeled as Specialty Sampler, Kitchen Hold." I was already grabbing my coat. "You think—" "It's the second jar, I think," Wolfe said, "that we will either find it there or find who took it." The shop was exactly as I remembered it. Sleek, curated and staffed by a man who looked like he owned 5 bow ties and rotated them seasonally. He didn't recognize me, which I counted as a small mercy. "I'm looking for a hold order," I told him. "From Agatha Sulwick. Should have been a specialty item, possibly labeled kitchen stock." He frowned, then checked a side ledger. His finger stopped. "Yes. Actually, that's odd. It was here. But someone from the council picked it up last week. I didn't let the pause last too long." "Who?" He consulted a receipt. "A man named Franco Willis." The bow-tie clerk smiled apologetically. "He said she'd asked him to retrieve it. Showed ID, perfectly polite. Of course he was. I left the shop and made the call to Wolfe. He has the second jar," I said. "Franco?" "No," Wolfe said. "He had it. He retrieved it, yes, but he wouldn't hold it. He's not careful enough. He was the mule." "So who's holding it now?" "That," Wolfe said, "is what we'll ask him." By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe had already arranged for Franco to appear under the pretense of clarifying supply chain inconsistencies. It was Saul's idea. Send a vague message, make it sound bureaucratic. People like Franco hate unresolved. Logistics. He showed up at 6 sharp, sweater vest neatly pressed, eyes darting behind round glasses. "I don't understand the urgency," he said, as Wolfe waved him to the red chair. "If this is about the delivery rotation—" "It is not," Wolfe said. "Sit." Franco sat. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. The air chilled. "You retrieved a jar from Madison and Peel." Franco blinked. "Well, yes. That was a council errand. Faber asked me to get it. I assumed it was part of the internal archive. Where is it now?" Franco opened his mouth, closed it. I don't know." "You delivered it." Franco nodded slowly. "To Faber's assistant, Dana. She handles his off-site records." "Describe her." "Tall, blonde, severe. Doesn't make small talk." I already had my phone out. I sent Saul a message with her name and a request. "Find her fast." Wolfe pressed harder. "Was the seal read?" "Yes," I asked. "She told me not to worry about it." I wasn't worried. It looked like any other. "It was not," Wolfe said. "It was the original compound. The one Agatha referenced in her recordings." Franco went white. You've heard them?" Wolfe stared. "We have heard the truth, which is more than I can say for you." Franco stood up suddenly. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what it was. I just did what I was told." "Then you were used," Wolfe said. "And if you want that noted in the record, you will remain available." Franco nodded like a man who didn't dare do otherwise. I escorted him out. When I returned, Wolfe had closed his eyes. "She won't hide it forever," he said. "She will either destroy it or try to trade it." For what? Protection, leverage, silence, perhaps even escape. My phone buzzed. "Saul Dana Langston. No recent apartment lease. Uses a P.O. box in Midtown. Accessed it yesterday. Tracking now." I read it aloud. Wolfe nodded once. "Soon," he said. The second jar will surface, and when it does, so will the buyer. I asked, you think there's a market for this stuff? No, Wolfe said. There's a buyer, just one, a person with enough to lose and enough influence to suppress it permanently. And if we find them first. Then, Wolfe said quietly, we deliver what Agatha intended. Justice? No, he said. Exposure. It was just past 7. Outside, the city was beginning to glitter. Inside, the last piece of the trap was moving toward the light. Wolfe didn't say another word after that. He turned back to the orchids with the kind of finality that meant the rest of the night was off limits to discussion, speculation, or anything that didn't involve petals and humidity levels. I left him to it, headed to the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of Fritz's post-dinner coffee, thick enough to slow a bullet and just bitter enough to match the mood. By the time I finished it, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Saul. Dana Langston made a pickup at P.O. Box. She's heading north, suburban train. I'm on her. I stepped into the office. Langston's on the move, I said. Left her P.O. Box, now heading north. Saul's tailing. Wolfe didn't turn. She will try to disappear, he said. Not permanently, just long enough for leverage to shift, for the highest bidder to emerge. You think she's shopping? The jar? She's holding the last card. Someone will try to buy silence or acquisition. I nodded slowly. If she's bluffing, she'll wait for the highest price. If not, she's already made contact. Correct. I waited. Nothing. That was the end of Wolfe's contribution for the evening. The next morning came fast and grey. By the time Fritz had finished laying out breakfast, quail eggs, spiced apple scones, and a tomato preserve, Wolfe only tolerated when the weather turned, I already had a fresh report from Saul. Dana had exited the train at Larchmont, then taken a cab into a private residential cul-de-sac nestled deep in old money country. Saul kept it tight. Destination is large stone house, registered to retired financier Harlan Greaves. No movement yet. She's still inside. That got Wolfe's attention. He lifted a single eyebrow, which in his internal language translated roughly to ah. I stared at him. You know the name. Harlan Greaves, Wolfe said, wiping his fingers delicately on a napkin. Once a venture capitalist, now a recluse, but not inactive. Explain. Greaves funds research, privately. He has quietly sponsored over a dozen biotech startups in the last 4 years, each one dealing with behavioral modification, neurochemical triggers, or dietary absorption. I let out a low whistle. So if someone wanted to turn Agatha's formula into a product, he would be their angel investor. And if Dana is there, she's either handing him the compound, Wolfe said, or attempting to blackmail him with it. He stood. Let me say that again. Wolfe stood. Not fully. He braced one hand on the desk and pushed off just far enough to shift weight to his feet. Then he sat again like a mountain sighing. But that movement meant something. It meant gravity had shifted. Call Saul, Wolfe said. Tell him not to intervene. Just watch. I want to know what leaves that house, and who with it. I made the call. Saul was already 2 steps ahead. Dana stayed in the Greaves house for 90 minutes. Then she emerged with a small hard case, metal, square, and nondescript. The kind of thing you use for prescription samples or microfilm. She took a cab back to the Larchmont station, but she didn't board a train. She waited. Transfer, I said aloud, relaying the update. She's handing it off. Good, Wolfe said. We'll let her. 20 minutes later, Saul's next message came through. Handoff confirmed. Man late 30s, dark overcoat, took case, headed southbound train. License plate traced to Shell Corporation linked to, wait for it, Faber. I read the text aloud. Wolfe closed his eyes. So, he said, the circle closes. You want Saul to intercept him? No. Follow. Let him return to the nest. And he did. By early afternoon, Saul had followed the courier to a commercial property in the Flatiron district, a modest floor-and-a-half space registered to a culinary marketing firm called Vitis Concepts. We pulled the incorporation data. One director, Miles Faber. When I showed Wolfe the filing, he smiled faintly. A business shell wrapped in gastronomy, he said. Clever, unoriginal. Now what? Now, Wolfe said, we retrieve the jar. And how do we do that? Knock on the door and ask nicely? Wolfe turned his head just enough to lock eyes with me. We invite them here. It didn't take much. A formal letter drafted on Wolfe's personal stationery was hand-delivered to Faber's office by a messenger Saul trusted. The letter was brief and surgical. It read, Mr. Faber, I am in possession of certain data concerning Ms. Agatha Solwick, recently gone missing. I understand you now hold the second artifact of interest. You are invited to a meeting at 6 p.m. Sharp. I expect your presence and that of any relevant parties. Refusal will be understood as admission. Yours, Nero Wolfe, at 5:57 p.m. The bell rang. I opened the door. Faber entered first. Composed. Trim. He had 2 people with him, Dana Langston and a man I didn't recognize. Late 30s, tense, eyes like polished graphite. He held the case. We led them into the office. Wolfe was seated, motionless in the oversized chair that had seen more confessions than a Vatican booth. No one spoke at first. Then Wolfe said, Place the case on the table. The man obeyed. Faber didn't blink. You've made your point, Faber said. Now what? Wolfe gestured lazily. Now, he said, you listen. He turned his head to me. I opened the laptop and played the recording. The one from the red-labeled card. Agatha's voice filled the room. Controlled, clear, irrevocable. You've already eaten them. At that line, Dana flinched. Faber remained perfectly still, but the graphite-eyed courier looked at him. Wolfe didn't gloat. He didn't even move. He let the recording play to its final sentence, then allowed silence to stretch. You have 2 options, Wolfe said finally. 1. You walk out of here and wait for this to go public. You will be discredited. Investigated, ruined. Faber's mouth tightened. Or, Wolfe continued, you cooperate. You identify the compound. You name your collaborators. You provide a clean breakdown of the supply chain. You confess to the council what was in their products. And what do I get? Time, Wolfe said. And a lawyer. Faber didn't respond, but Dana stepped forward. I want immunity, she said. If I testify, if I give you everything, you will give it to the authorities, Wolfe said coldly. Not me. She looked at Faber. He didn't look back. And then, just like that, it cracked. The courier opened the case. Inside was the second jar. Same red seal, untouched. He placed it on the desk and stepped away. Faber's face was rigid. You think you've won, he said. No, Wolfe said. Agatha won. I am merely the usher. They left one by one, escorted by Saul, who'd entered silently at the halfway mark and stationed himself by the door. When the brownstone was quiet again, Wolfe exhaled slowly. We will turn the jar over tomorrow, he said. And the recordings, but not the report. Becker's analysis? Wolfe nodded. We will keep it until Agatha returns, or until her absence is confirmed. I asked the obvious question. You think she's alive? I think, Wolfe said, that she is, not quite finished. He lifted his glass of beer, unhurried, and somewhere beyond reach but not beyond reckoning, Agatha Solwick waited for the sound of the trap closing. The morning after the handoff, the brownstone smelled faintly of vanilla and resolve. Fritz had baked something custard-based and deceptively simple, the kind of dish that looked modest, but took 3 precise temperature checks and a degree of inner peace to pull off. Wolfe didn't comment on the flavor. He was conserving his breath for strategy. We had the second jar, Becker's chemical breakdown, and a confession sealed in body language from 3 people who couldn't hold eye contact for more than a minute. The only thing we didn't have was a body, or Agatha. At 9:04 a.m., Saul returned to the house with a manila folder and the blank expression of someone who'd finally confirmed what he didn't want to. "She's alive," he said, "but hiding. Intentionally." He placed the folder on Wolfe's desk and stepped back. Wolfe raised an eyebrow, then slid the folder open with one finger. Inside, a series of surveillance photos, dated and time-stamped. Agatha Solwick, different haircut, darker clothes, a rented cabin in the Hudson Highlands. She wasn't disguised, not exactly, just reduced, like a dish she'd simmered down to its barest essence. Saul explained as Wolfe flipped through the stills. She arranged a cabin under the name Hannah Gale, checked in 3 days after her disappearance. The property is privately owned, not on the usual vacation rentals. Paper trail is shallow but clean. She left no digital signature, no calls, no purchases. But I traced the delivery driver who's been dropping groceries. He ID'd her without hesitation. I leaned against the office doorframe. "So she faked her own vanishing?" "No," Wolfe said, not looking up. "She orchestrated it, a disappearance with a purpose, to let the system move without her. Then what now? She has seen the trap close. She must decide whether to emerge." Wolfe closed the folder, then turned his gaze on me. "You will go to her, alone. Bring nothing official. Take the photos. Speak plainly. Offer no promises. And if she doesn't want to talk?" "She will," Wolfe said. "She built this. She needs to know if it held." I left within the hour. The drive north was uneventful, if you don't count a car radio that seemed determined to only play 80s synth ballads, which did a fine job of making me feel like I was heading toward either salvation or a hostage negotiation. The cabin was a simple cedar-paneled thing on the edge of a wooded ridge. No mailbox, no visible tech. The kind of place where the air actually smells like pine and distant wood smoke. I knocked once. No answer. I waited, counted to 10, then knocked again. She opened the door. Agatha Solwick looked like a woman who'd slept, not deeply, but with a clean conscience. She had the kind of face that didn't try to look younger or older. It just existed in a state of pure utility. Her eyes were steady, measured. And when she saw me, she didn't flinch. I was. "Wondering when you'd come," she said. "You don't seem surprised. I designed the collapse. Eventually someone would arrive." She gestured me inside. No small talk, no tea offer, just a motion toward a chair and the kind of silence that needed no filling. "I'm Archie Goodwin," I said. "I know who you—" "Ah, Wolfe sent me," she nodded. "And?" "He has the jar. Both jars, actually. And the recordings." Faber's bluff collapsed faster than we expected. Dana Langston flipped before the recording even finished. Not surprising. Dana's spine is made of contracts and ambition. He intends to cut a deal, maybe avoid jail time. That would be a shame. "You're alive," I said. She smiled faintly. "That would also be a shame to some. Why stay hidden?" She didn't answer right away. "Then because knowing you were right is not the same as surviving being right. If I'd stayed, they'd have silenced me. Legally, financially, or worse. Disappearing gave me control. Let the formula find its way back to them. I needed to. See if they'd protect it, destroy it, or try to sell it. They tried all 3. I knew they would." She stood and crossed to a small table, opened a drawer and removed a notebook. She handed it to me. "This is the original, my full documentation. Timeline, dosage reactions. I didn't put it on the memory cards because I needed something no one else could access, unless I wanted them to. I took it carefully. Why give it to us now? Because it's over. You closed it. Not completely, I said. Faber still walks. Greaves hasn't been touched. She nodded. And they will keep walking until someone bigger decides otherwise. But the power is gone, the compound is exposed. There's no longer an edge to sell, just risk. You sure they won't come after you? I'm not, she said simply. But if they do, they'll find someone with nothing left to lose. You planning to come back? Eventually, quietly, the brand is dead. Agatha Solwick will go back to being a person. I tucked the notebook under my arm. I'll tell Wolfe you're safe, she smiled, genuinely this time. Tell him he was inevitable. When I returned to the brownstone, the lights were low. Wolfe was finishing dinner. Braised rabbit with lemon rosemary, courtesy of Fritz's lifelong war against blandness. I handed him the notebook. He didn't open it right away. She's alive, I said. And proud. As she should be. She said to tell you, see, you were inevitable. Wolfe grunted. That was high praise in either direction. She's staying off the grid. For now. Wise. I poured a drink. So what now? The press will get wind eventually. The council will fracture. The compound's out of play, but the idea isn't going anywhere. No, Wolfe said. But now it exists in light. Its power is gone. The formula will be studied, dissected, regulated. It will be contained. I raised my glass. And Agatha. She outmaneuvered her enemies. That is the best revenge. Better than prison. Better than scandal. Better than pickle sales. He allowed himself a smile. Not wide, but sincere. Mr. Goodwin, he said, I believe we have earned peace, however brief. And just like that, the brownstone returned to its natural order. Outside, the city turned its wheels. Inside, Fritz served a simple custard with cardamom. Wolfe lifted a spoon, contemplative. It's remarkable, he said softly, how many lies can ferment inside a jar. I leaned back, glass in hand. Yeah, but eventually someone always tastes the truth. And with that, the case was closed. The next morning, peace didn't so much arrive as loiter uncomfortably on the brownstone's doorstep. Fritz served a breakfast of crisped polenta with poached eggs and something green he wouldn't name, and Wolfe consumed it with the kind of silent precision that usually meant he was clearing mental underbrush. I didn't disturb him. We'd closed the loop, or so we thought. 2 jars secured, Faber cornered, exposed. Agatha accounted for and in possession of her own narrative. It was, by Wolfe's standards, neat, tidy, conclusive. So when Saul called at 10:42 a.m., Wolfe didn't flinch, but I saw his fingers pause just slightly on the rim of his coffee cup. I took the call in the hall. Something's off, Saul said, straight to it. Langston's missing. I blinked. Dana? Gone. Apartment cleared out overnight. Not just clothes, hard drives, notebooks, storage containers. Neighbors said she left around 3 a.m. with 2 duffel bags. No goodbye, no cab, nothing on traffic cams for a 10-block radius. She bolted. She had help. I hung up and returned to the office. Wolfe was waiting. I didn't need to say a word. He'd read it on my face. She's fled, he said. I nodded. She got spooked, or she was never planning to stay and play. Not spooked, Wolfe murmured. Directed. You think Faber sent her? No, I think Greaves did. That hung in the air because Faber's already tainted. But Dana's less visible. More than that, Wolfe said. She's the survivor. She was never meant to build the system. She was meant to salvage it when it fell. I paced once, twice. She's carrying the notes, the backups, whatever didn't end up in the jars or on those cards. And she knows, Wolfe said, that Agatha is alive, which means her leverage has an expiration. Darty! A knock at the door made me stop mid-step. Unscheduled knocks don't happen here. They arrive. I opened it to find a courier in a grey uniform and expression to match. He handed me a flat envelope and left without a word. No signature required. No return address. I carried it in. Wolfe didn't touch it. I opened it carefully. Inside, a printed message, unmarked and unsigned. 2 lines. Not everyone belongs in the light. Some things still grow better in brine. There was something else. A photograph. It was a shot of Agatha's cabin, taken from a tree line. Distant, blurry, but unmistakable. Wolfe stared at it for 5 full seconds. "She's been located," he said quietly. "By someone who shouldn't have." "Greaves?" "No," Wolfe said. "Someone who works for him. A retriever. Langston didn't run. She pivoted." I sat. "You think they're going after her? They won't kill her, not now, but they may contain her." I stood. "We need to move." "No," Wolfe said. "You need to arrive, unexpected, unannounced, with clarity. Take Panzer. Go now." I didn't argue. Saul was already waiting with the car by the time I reached the curb. We drove north in silence, both of us knowing the difference between closing a case and keeping it closed. The cabin was still there, still quiet, still lined with those same pines, but something felt off before we even opened the door. The side window was cracked open, the glass pane just slightly off alignment. I drew my gun, stepped inside. No Agatha. The bed was made. Coffee cup in the sink, no signs of struggle. But gone. On the table, a note. Folded once. "They found me. Not because of you. Because I waited too long. Keep the formula buried. They will try again." Saul said nothing. I stepped outside and scanned the ground. No tire marks, but a single set of boot prints leading toward the backwoods. Large, shallow, deliberate. Whoever had come for her wasn't in a hurry, no blood, no drag marks, a clean extraction. "She went willingly," I said, "or didn't fight it." We returned to the car and I called Wolfe. "She's gone," I said. "Not violently, but gone." A long pause, then, "Come home." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe sat like a man watching tectonic plates shift just beneath his carpet. "We lost the witness," I said. "But we have the proof, the samples, the recordings." "She knew that," Wolfe replied. "That's why she left, to preserve the evidence she had to remove herself." "You think they'll keep her alive?" "Yes, because she's no longer a threat. She's a myth now, unverifiable. A shadow behind the story. Her disappearance confirms the danger, but without her, no one can weaponize the narrative. Except us." "No," Wolfe said. "We don't need to. The council has disbanded. The records are archived. The regulators will swarm what's left of Faber's shell companies. Langston will spend the next 10 years circling dead ends. Greaves has what he wanted, silence and uncertainty." I poured a drink. "So they won." Wolfe's eyes flicked up. "No," he said. "They merely endured. But so did we. Seems like a draw." "No. A draw requires equal damage." Wolfe's voice darkened just slightly. "They lost their future. All we lost was the end of the story." That sat with me. Then Wolfe said, "There will be no further action, no press, no statements. We release the jars to the FDA with an anonymous tip and send the memory cards to the Federal Archive." "And Agatha?" Wolfe stared out the window. "Lives," he said. "That is enough." The room fell quiet. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, we filed the last report. We locked the second jar in a lead-lined case, and Fritz packed it with the same calm he applied to cold cuts. I logged the last entry, then leaned back in the chair. "You know," I said, "I never trusted—" "Pickles," Wolfe grunted. I stood and stretched. The case hadn't ended cleanly, but it had ended with purpose. In Wolfe's world, that counted. We'd heard her voice, traced her trail, exposed a system, dismantled an illusion, and preserved a woman's intent. We didn't win. We clarified, which is all Nero Wolfe ever claimed to do. And when the next knock came, days later, softer than the rest, I opened the door expecting a package. Instead, there was a small brown envelope, no stamp, no seal. Inside, a single preserved pickle spear, labeled in red. No note, just the taste of unfinished work. I stood at the door with the envelope in my hand for a full 10 seconds before closing it. The street outside was empty. No footsteps, no tail lights, no sound. Whoever had delivered the spear had done it clean, and if Saul hadn't seen it happen, then they'd done it better than clean. I brought it into the office and laid it gently on Wolfe's desk, unsealing the flap as if I were opening a fuse box in the middle of a flood. The spear inside was sealed in vacuum plastic. It looked identical to the others, pale green, uniform cut, horseradish infusion just faint enough to suggest intent without commitment. But the label was different. It wasn't just red. It was handwritten. No formula. Just memory. Wolfe took one look and didn't touch it. Memory, he said quietly. A personal batch, not for testing, for reminding. Of what? That she's still out there, watching, waiting. I leaned back. So she's not finished? No. Wolfe said, but she is now beyond reach. That changes the stakes. I sat. She wants us to know she's safe. She wants us to know she hasn't stopped thinking. The phrase on the label kept echoing in my head. No formula, just memory. It wasn't a warning. It was a gesture. She's writing the ending herself, I said. No, Wolfe replied. She's refusing one. That afternoon we logged the pickle in the evidence cabinet beside the others, though Wolfe insisted it not be tested. It is not data, he said. It is epilogue. We let the world return to itself. The council dissolved. Members gave quiet interviews, mostly playing dumb, some throwing elbows at Faber. A few rebranded. One went into full denial and launched a new product line called Brave Ferments, which lasted all of 3 weeks before regulators shut it down. The FDA took the tip seriously. Becker's analysis was scrubbed of names and handed off through one of Wolfe's rare legal intermediaries. Within a month, a quiet investigation was underway, buried in a stack of federal filings, so dense it would take a mole with a law degree to find it. As for Faber, he took a sabbatical, spent time abroad. His name still floated through niche business circles, but even the most desperate venture capitalists started to treat him like a sealed container marked unstable contents. Langston vanished, but not completely. Saul picked up traces, new banking credentials, encrypted emails routed through overseas proxies. A relocation, not an erasure. Like a seed, Wolfe murmured when I told him, waiting for the right soil. Agatha, though, she was gone. No sightings, no signals, not even a trace in the kinds of places where fugitives linger. Burner phones, supply orders, cabin rentals. She hadn't just stepped off the board. She'd taken her square with her, and then came the second envelope, a month after the first. Same size, same weight. This one was labeled in black ink. Use only when necessary. Wolfe read it, said nothing. He placed it in the same drawer where he kept the handwritten confession from a mob accountant in '57, the orchid ransom note from a jealous botanist, and the only remaining copy of a certain chess match transcript that had indirectly caused a suicide. In Wolfe's world, drawers like that weren't for storage. They were for future leverage. I didn't press. I knew better. When Wolfe said not now, it meant there would be a then. And then time passed. 3 weeks. Uneventful. Until Harlan Greaves died. Natural causes, said the obituary. Heart failure. He was found in his townhouse library, surrounded by manuscripts and quietly unpaid invoices. No scandal, no noise. The papers didn't make the connection, but we did. Wolfe read the notice with mild detachment. Then he turned to me. Begin reading corporate filings for VT's concepts. Looking for what? For who inherits it. That led us to an LLC in Zurich, then to a research firm in Seoul, then to a holding pattern so dense even Saul took hair's day to untangle it. But at the end we found something unexpected. A new research trust registered to a foundation called Echo Root. No board, no press release, just a mission statement to study and prevent the non-consensual use of neurochemical modifiers in consumer goods. I read it twice. Then again. Agatha, I said, she's converting the weapon into a firewall, or making sure no. One builds it again. Wolfe sat back, folded his hands over his stomach. She understands the principle, he said. The only way to kill an idea is to give it structure. You think she's behind the foundation? She is the foundation. That night I logged the last entry, closed the case file. I even reached for a new folder and labeled it Echo Root, just in case. Wolfe poured himself a beer. Not a celebratory. One, a reflective one. We sat in silence until Fritz brought in a small dish, red cabbage, chilled, lightly pickled. Wolfe stared at it. Fritz, he said, you've timed that poorly. Fritz inclined his head. Sir, it was requested. Wolfe blinked. By whom? And that's when I saw it. On the tray beside the dish. A note. Clipped to a single sprig of dill. No envelope, no flourish. Just 5 words in neat, even script. This is not the end. Wolfe stared at it for a long time. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. Not out of satisfaction, out of recognition. Agatha Solwick had left the board, but not the game. And if she ever returned to it, we would be ready. Because some mysteries don't close, some jars don't seal, and some voices, when preserved just right, never fade. By the time the note arrived, 5 words on paper, no signature, no date. We weren't solving a case anymore, we were living in its echo. Wolfe tucked it away in the same drawer where he'd filed the red-sealed spear labeled Just Memory, and I knew without needing to ask, this one was staying unsolved. On paper, anyway. But that didn't mean it hadn't ended. The agencies, federal, state, alphabet soup, got what Wolfe let them have. The recordings, Becker's findings, even a discreet summary of the supply chain that Faber had fumbled together before folding his operation like a cheap deck chair. Wolfe never claimed credit. He never does. That would have required him to speak directly to someone in government, and he'd sooner eat kale. Faber disappeared into obscurity, or possibly Switzerland. The Langston Trail went cold for now, and the red jars, the 2 we had plus the one Agatha likely still carried, were in safe, separate places. We didn't destroy them. Wolfe said destruction was arrogance. Let them serve, he told me, as a reminder that taste, like power, can be tampered with, can be tampered. But the real ending didn't happen with the federal drop-off or the envelope, or even the closing of the case file. It happened one evening, about a week after the final note. I was in the kitchen with Fritz, debating the merits of paprika in deviled eggs. He claimed it was cosmetic. I said it had punch. When Wolfe called me in, the door was closed. A glass of beer waited for him on the desk, untouched. He didn't speak right away. That's his move when something's already been decided. You asked me once, he said, whether we won. Yeah, I remember your answer. It was incomplete. I sat. So give me the finished version. Wolfe tapped a finger on the desk once. We did not win because we solved a crime. We won because we prevented its repetition. Faber's scheme relied on ignorance, on people mistaking. Chemistry for flavor. That illusion is broken now. They will try again, but never quite the same way. And Agatha. She knew that preserving the evidence wasn't enough. She had to preserve the idea of consequence. I leaned back. You admire her. Admiration is imprecise, he said. But I concede she played a long game with exceptional clarity. Reached for the drawer, opened it, and removed the note. This is not the end. She is not threatening us, Wolfe said. She is reminding us that vigilance has no finish line. I nodded. So, that's it? No, he said. That's all. He lifted his beer and took a long sip. Outside, the city did what it always does. Hummed, throbbed, made noise no one quite understands. Inside, everything was still. There were no last-minute confessions. No chase, no flashbulbs, just a preserved voice, a quiet man in a big chair, and a case that ended exactly the way it began, with one person knowing something and another person determined to understand why. That's what Wolfe does, that's what I do, and when the next knock comes we'll be ready, just maybe hold the pickles.